Statistical, mathematical fact
never has been down.
has broken every single record. There is no asset that has come close.
It's the only thing in the industry that was not touched, that was not hacked, and it never fails doing what it promised in 2009. It's never
What's
failed.
the best performing asset the world has ever seen? And you'll find out that it's Bitcoin.
I titled our talk today, Why Bitcoin Will Dominate the Rest of This Decade from 2025 through the end of the decade. It will dominate the 2020s and beyond. And I want to touch upon why I believe this is the case. And not only will it dominate the rest of this decade and beyond into the 2030s and the 2040s and the 2050s, but I really want to focus more on the next 5 years of this decade. The second half of this decade belongs to Bitcoin. And I want to give you some ideas, or I want to share my ideas as to why I believe this is the case. So let's get started. So why is it specifically that I believe that the second half of this decade, the 2020s, belongs entirely to Bitcoin? Why do I believe that Bitcoin will dominate the narrative, dominate all of your themes? And it's because of a variety of different things. There are several reasons that lead me to this conclusion. And let's just talk about a variety of them, and in no particular order. Okay, no particular order. For the first time in Bitcoin's 15-year history, especially as it comes to the United States, there is clear regulatory clarity as to what it is. As from a US centric point of view. From a US centric point of view, Bitcoin has been established as a commodity. And this was actually established by the United States in 2014, if my memory serves me correctly. So in 2014, Bitcoin was deemed a commodity. What's really interesting about that is that it's deemed a commodity because it has no issuer. Now, this is a very important distinction to understand. There is nothing other than a commodity that can not have an issuer. So gold doesn't have an issuer. So your commodities don't have an issuer. Everything else that has an issuer can't really truly be a commodity, can it be? I mean, I know we loosely throw that word around, but in the true sense of the word commodity, the purest definition of a commodity is that it is not issued by anyone. So Bitcoin was deemed a commodity without an issuer. It was never issued. Unlike every single altcoin out there in the world, unlike every single stock, equity, every single bond, every single other financial product that you can possibly think of has an issuer. Bitcoin has no issuer. It was never issued, ever. Okay? So that was established in 2014. But also, so what we have now for the first time is clear regulatory clarity regarding Bitcoin from a US-centric point of view that are no longer punitive to actually holding it, to actually having it on your balance sheet. That's the first time in Bitcoin's entire 15-year history. Prior to this, holding Bitcoin and accounting for your holdings was very, very destructive to the bottom line of your company. It was punitive. It was actually very discouraging to do that. And for the first time in Bitcoin's 15-year-old history, we not only have regulatory clarity, we also have FASB rule. We have accounting rules that actually make it favorable, or no longer punitive, I should say, to hold the asset on your balance sheet. First time in history. For the first time in Bitcoin's history, it is considered to be a financialized asset in the traditional ecosystem. It is wrapped in a vehicle that is the most efficient financial vehicle that's ever been created in financial markets. It is wrapped in a familiar vehicle that everyone loves, adores, high liquidity, high efficiency, and that everyone understands and needs absolutely zero education to embrace. First time. In addition to that, you have all of the recent moves over the last several years by the United States to actually show via their actions that the country is positioning itself to be a big player in Bitcoin's future. And let's quickly go over this. Despite the fact that I had a very special talk regarding this, let's go over some of the moves by the United States briefly that show that despite there being conflicting messages amongst certain political factions, the actual moves by the country itself, the United States, are very, very pro-Bitcoin. So number one, regulatory clarity. It's a commodity without an issuer. Number two, our global accounting standards no longer approach it in a punitive fashion. People can hold it, companies can hold it without it being detrimental to the bottom line. Number two. Number three, shortly after the China Bitcoin mining ban, America rolled out the red carpets, invited all of China's exiled Bitcoin miners to the United States, visas, passports, residency, whatever you needed, come here. Now, a lot of people don't understand this, but that move by China was a great faux pas, in my opinion. China went from being the dominant hash rate, the dominant power as far as Bitcoin hash rate in the world is from a country perspective, to being number three in the world, and America shot to number one. And I'm here to tell you that America will never lose its number one status as the dominant source of Bitcoin hash rate power. They vied for it. They went after it. And today, about 36, 37% of Bitcoin's hash power comes from the United States. That's item number three. To annex that, we have to understand that there are a variety of states that are very, very tax advantageous for Bitcoin miners. The narrative regarding Bitcoin mining being detrimental to the environment is pretty much dead today. In addition to that, the United States is the largest owner of Bitcoin out of any country in the entire world. It approved 10 Bitcoin ETFs all on the same day. 10, not just one, 10. And it approved these ETFs owned and controlled by the world's top money managers. If you go down the list of the top 4 or 5 Bitcoin ETF providers in the United States, they basically control the world as far as money management is concerned. I don't think that's a mistake. So America threw its best at the ETF. America made sure, the US made sure that its top elite countries, BlackRock, Fidelity, so forth and so on, were the ones to do this. There's no rinky-dink cryptocurrency organization that wanted to, they didn't do that. They made sure the elite of the elite of the elite was behind this. Now, if you track these steps, these are not the steps or the actions or the moves by someone who is hostile to something. These steps clearly show that we're embracing it. We've made sure everyone knows it is a commodity without an issuer. We've made sure everyone knows that we're changing the rules where you're going to count it. It's now favorable to hold it. It's now favorable to put it on your balance sheet. It wasn't before, but we've changed that now. All right. We have taken all the miners that were kicked out of China and brought them to our country. And so now we're the number one country as far as hash power regarding Bitcoin. And we have basically made sure that the best and the brightest and the most influential and the most powerful organizations are behind the first step in financializing the asset itself. BlackRock, Fidelity, and so forth and so on. Now, this is huge. This is huge. So this has set, and by the way, we're the largest owner of Bitcoin in the entire world as far as countries are concerned. That's insane. When you put those things in a row, bullet point, and you write those things down, and you didn't tell anyone who did these, you didn't tell them it was the United States. You say, well, whoever did this, and you ask them, whatever person or entity did this, are they pro-Bitcoin or not pro-Bitcoin? And they would clearly say, these are pro-Bitcoin steps right here, okay? And so this is one of the cornerstones that form the foundation upon which I've built my theses that Bitcoin is being positioned to be the dominant thing in for the rest of the decade and beyond. All the preparatory steps are very clear to me. Now, you've got a new faction. The BRICS nations are doing their thing over here and attempting to get away from hegemony with the US dollar and so forth and so on. We want to have less reliance on the US dollar. What it seems very clear to me is that the United States says, oh, really? Really? BRICS? Okay, I've got something better than your brick. I've got Bitcoin. So you've got the BRICS nations going over here with trying to form another currency, another shitcoin, another fiat creation. None of them trust each other, by the way, but they're banded together by this insatiable desire to get away from the US dollar. And their answer to that is to create another version of it, their own version of it. And what is America's response? We're going to go the Bitcoin route. We're going to institutionalize this thing. We're going to wrap it in the best wrapper from a TradFi perspective that you can wrap it in. We're going to make sure the best of our best companies are behind that product. We're going to set the law and make the rules straight and clear. It's a commodity without an issuer. It is not a security. There's regulatory clarity. And we're going to get all this nonsense that makes it punitive for you to have it. We're going to change all the rules for that. And we're going to make sure that we hold more than any other country in the world. And we're going to dominate Bitcoin's hash rate power. So while everyone's scurrying over to the BRICS, America's response appears to be, do that. Go play with your brick. Go play with your little bricks. We'll do Bitcoin. I know for some it might be difficult to look at it this way because of all the smoke screens put out there by the so-called gatekeepers. You have the Biden administration, who seems to be just consistently hostile against Bitcoin and anything crypto related, for that matter. And all of the moves recently with jailing some people and proposals to prevent financial organizations from custodying Bitcoin and all of these things, it's all smokescreen. It's all narratives that, in my opinion, are being used to camouflage what the US is really doing behind the scenes. They are positioning to be the dominant player in the future for the next decade and beyond in Bitcoin, while everyone else is scurrying around trying to create some other fiat currency. Let's go to cornerstone number 2, okay? If you'll allow me. Cornerstone number 2, reason number 2, Bitcoin will dominate the rest of this decade and beyond, is Japan. That's right. Japan is cornerstone number 2. Now, let me briefly try to go over this. This is not the format to go do a deep dive on this. Use some broad strokes and you'll get the message, okay? Japan is a key factor in why Bitcoin will dominate the rest of the 2020s and beyond. They're a key factor because of something called the Japanese carry trade. Now, the Japanese carry trade was one of the easiest plays the financial world has ever had because Japan had near zero rates for decades. It made the Japanese carry trade the closest thing to a guaranteed winning trade that the financial world has ever seen. And it lasted for a couple of decades. Now, the way it worked is this. Japan was that central bank, that country that was the most aggressive with this experiment called fiat money printing. And the world, and more particularly the United States, put Japan in the lead position to experiment in the most aggressive way with it. No one printed money more than Japan. No one printed it faster. No developed nation printed it harder, printed it faster, without any regard for anything. And for a very long time, this aggressive printing of the Japanese yen did not have a tremendous negative effect on the overall financial structure of the country. And for a while, it looked like it was actually possible to print enormous amounts of money without there being negative consequences. But eventually, the roosters came home to roost. Because of this situation, Japan had to keep rates near zero. Raising rates would be detrimental. And so they had to keep rates near zero. This set up what's called the Japanese carry trade. Because rates were near zero, money was basically free if you got it from Japan. So here's the way this trade worked in a nutshell. You borrowed yen, right, for practically zero, close to zero. You borrowed yen, right? You converted the yen to a higher yielding currency. You got the yen practically free, billions of dollars in yen. You convert the yen to US dollars. With the US dollars, you put it in US Treasury bills or bonds that are yielding 3%, 4%. So now think about it. You're getting money with almost zero cost, close to it. The cost to exchange is very small. The cost to exchange from yen to dollars, you got a little cost there, but then you'd stick it in a 4% yielding, and that arbitrage, 0 to 4, or practically 0 to 4, was a freaking guaranteed win. Now you leverage that up. And you do it by the tens of billions of dollars. And Wall Street looked like a genius when they really weren't a genius. The returns seemed like Wall Street was smart, but they really weren't. You could do that. I could do that. In fact, a whole bunch of females in Japan, I can't remember the name of the group, they did it by the hundreds of millions of dollars. Homemakers in Japan, while their husbands were work, in Japan, most women control the finances at home. And so many of these went from day trading stocks to basically doing the Japanese carry trade, and they were extraordinarily successful. Someone might be able to mention the name of the group of Japanese women who've been doing this for 2 decades. But anyway, so I'm going to get to the point, I promise, right now. This Japanese carry trade was rocket fuel for US assets, in particular, the US stock market. You see, people would borrow yen for almost zero, convert the yen to the US dollar, take the US dollar and stick it in the S&P 500. Now, the S&P 500 over the past 10 years has averaged close to 14% a year. Now, think about it. Getting money close to zero and getting almost a 14% spread, that's insane. That's guaranteed money. That's guaranteed billions upon billions of dollars. And you could basically just go, as long as that stayed stable, you could go out and play golf every single day, crisscross from country to country in your private jet, doing lunch in Paris and dinner in Italy at night and so forth and so on, and not bat an eye and make billions of dollars from this trade. So what am I getting at? The Japanese carry trade it's not the only thing responsible for the unprecedented run in US equity prices to the upside, but it's one of them, and it's a big one of them. Do you understand? This was rocket fuel for US equities. Borrowing yen for near zero, converting to the dollar and sticking it in the S&P 500 or sticking it in the NASDAQ 100. Now, over the last 10 years, the NASDAQ 100 has averaged what? 16.1%, S&P almost 15% over the last 10 years. These are unprecedented returns. That's not normal. That's only in the last decade. Do you understand? Those gains went ballistic because of this easy trade with free money. But here's the rub. Are you ready for the rub? Japanese carry trade ain't what it used to be. Did you hear that? Let me just say it again, just in case. Japanese carry trade now going forward ain't what it used to be and never will be. What makes that trade work is that you need stability in the currency. Your currency starts to fluctuate and it can blow out that trade in a way that ruins your life. You need stability in the currency. Japanese not only does not have stability in its currency today, it never will again, ever. You need no intervention, no surprises by your central bank. Japan is in a position where it cannot defend its position now without constant and continuous central bank intervention. Too many surprises. We don't know what they're going to do next. It can blow the trade out. It's just not what it used to be. And the third thing that makes it not what it used to be is geopolitical uncertainty. And if there were ever a time when we in this world have geopolitical uncertainty, it is now. Do you understand? This trade is gone. No easy trade ever lasts forever. Especially an arbitrage situation like this, all arbitrages go to zero, all of them. That is their destiny, to basically the spread to go to zero. One of the rocket fuel jets behind US equities was this trade. Say bye, bye. Now, what does this mean for Bitcoin? Everyone needs alpha. With this trade gone, everyone needs alpha. Everyone needs performance. The performance is going to pale in comparison in equities to what it was during the last decade. This trade is gone. The Japanese carry trade is gone. You've got political tensions are not only rising exponentially, but this is likely to dominate the rest of the decade. What's the thing that was prepared and packaged nicely to handle the next era now that the Japanese carry trade is no longer really workable like it used to be? What has been prepared for the next leg of alpha, the next leg of performance? Look at the steps I just laid out. Regulatory clarity. Let's package this thing in a vehicle that everyone knows and understands. Let's send the message that we're not banning it. Let's change the accounting rules. Let's get all the miners in. Let's become number one in mining in the world. Let's let the world see we hold more than any other country in the world. Our states have tax advantages. Let's squash this nonsense that it's bad for the environment. Now you're starting to see everything is, oh, Bitcoin's great for the environment. Da, 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 da. Finally. And so you can see the preparatory steps that have been laid out because this is the next thing. It will dominate the narrative. So, what was cornerstone number one? All right, all of the preparatory steps by the US to send a clear message that We're pro Bitcoin. Cornerstone number 2, one of the market's major rocket fuel jets has gone out, the Japanese carry trade. Alpha is needed, performance is needed. Equities will not perform. Bonds have just experienced the worst period since 1812. Bonds are gone. 60-40 portfolio split where 60% equities, 60% equities, 40% bonds. That's performed the worst in history. 60-40 is gone. Bonds are trash. Equities will never see the gains that you saw during the last 10 years because the Japanese carry trade is going on. Bitcoin's the next thing. Why is it the next thing? It is the best performing asset over the last 10 years. It is the best performing asset over the last 15 years. It is the best performing asset over the last 5 years. It's the best performing asset over the last 2 years. It's the best performing asset over the last 1 year. It's the best performing asset over the past 5 months. It's the best performing. It has the record for being the best performing asset ever in the history of mankind. It has the record of being the best performing asset in a month, the best performing asset in a week, the best performing asset in a quarter, the best performing asset in a year, the best performing asset in 3 years, the best performing asset in 5 years, the best performing asset in 10 years, the best performing asset in 15 years. Every conceivable metric you can think of, Bitcoin is number one. And I am telling you, despite what the narrative, the conflicting narratives going around again, these people are not stupid. They're not blind. They see it. All the preparatory steps have been made to embrace it for the rest of the decade. Alpha's needed. This is where the alpha is. In addition to this, with the rising geopolitical tensions, with this growing global movement to get away from the dollar, America needs to respond. And I believe they're responding with Bitcoin. Jason Lowry told us they're responding with Bitcoin. And they've thrown their best at it, their absolute best. This is insane, guys. It's insane. Okay. What's the third cornerstone? Politics. Politics. That's right. That's the third cornerstone. I believe that Bitcoin is playing a very pivotal role in this 2024 US presidential election cycle. It's dominating a portion of the narrative of this presidential election, from President Trump's switch to more of a positive stance with Bitcoin and the topic crypto in general, to RFK Kennedy Jr. being pro-Bitcoin. It's dominating the biggest portion of the presidential narrative. It's dominating it more than it ever has in the past. In fact, it's never dominated it. It's becoming more pivotal in this election. In the following election, it will determine who's the president. That is my prediction, and I'm sticking to it. Mark it down. Save this clip. Write it down. Memorialize it. Hold me to it. It's pivotal in this presidential election. In 2028, it will decide the president of the United States. Bitcoin will. Nothing else will. Bitcoin is going to decide who is the president in 2028. Pivotal now for 2024. Pivotal. Meaningful. It'll be the only thing that decides in 2028. And you take these three things and put them together, it's extraordinarily powerful. The collapse of the Japanese carry trade, the fact that equities have a very, very long rest of the decade in front of them. Bonds are finished, worst performance since 1812. Where's your store of value now? Where is your alpha? It's got to be Bitcoin. All of the preparatory steps by the US, the regulatory bodies, packaging it in a vehicle that's easy for the TradFi system to embrace, wrapping it in that. And we can debate about whether that's good or not. That's not the point. The point is that you can clearly see we're preparing. We see where this is going. We're getting ahead of it. We're in the lead from a US-centric point of view. No country owns more. No country dominates the hash rate like the US. No country has as clear of a regulatory standing. No G20 nation has more of a clear regulatory stance as far as Bitcoin is concerned. America's thrown its best of the best of the best in the mix with Bitcoin, and the product, the spot Bitcoin ETFs, have broken virtually every conceivable record in ETF history, and we're just beginning. Now, if you don't see all of those things laid out for Bitcoin dominating the rest of this decade and beyond, I don't know what else to say. It's as clear as day. It's as clear as night follows the day, in fact. So my question is, what do you think? What do you think about what I just shared with you? I will say this. With everything I've just said, what's mind-boggling is the fact that Chi Sing She says, no comment. What is mind-boggling to me is that the world is still short the upside. Now, this term, short the upside, is very common in my industry. I've been in the financial world for 37 years professionally, 43 years if you count the idiot years. So this is a very common term in my industry, short the upside. What does that mean? It means that you're on zero. But you're not just on zero, you're short zero. There's a difference between I don't have any Bitcoin and you have no choice. You're gonna have to buy it. See, so that's the difference between zero position and short the upside position. Short the upside means I don't care if you like Bitcoin, don't like it, hate it, think it's the stupidest thing, think it's a Ponzi, think it's a bubble, think it's vaporware. I don't care what you think, you're still going to have to buy it. That's not zero, that's short the upside. And why do I say that the majority of the world is short the upside? I say that because there will be no choice. It will not come down to you being convinced that Bitcoin is good. It's going to come down to you're going to have to. It's game theory on, baby. If a bank starts hodling Bitcoin as a competitive bank, you may not even believe in Bitcoin. You're not going to let your competitive bank do something that you don't do. Boom. When Bitcoin becomes the most valuable asset outside of gold, the most valuable asset in the world outside of gold, who is going to be allowed not to own it? How do you not have some allocation to the most valuable thing on planet Earth outside of gold? How? Do you know what the most owned stock of the last decade was? The most owned stock in history of the last decade, it was Apple. But Apple dominated the number one position as being the number one most valuable asset outside of gold, which meant that you had to have some allocation to Apple. Even if you hated their freaking products, I don't like the iPhone, they're overpriced, it still didn't matter. If you didn't have it, you got fired. If you did not have Apple in your fund, you did not have a very long career over the last 10 years. Whether you liked Apple or not, whether you couldn't stand Steve Jobs or not, do you understand me? That's being short the upside, where it doesn't matter what I personally feel. I have to put money there because it's the most valuable thing on earth. Now, when does Bitcoin become the most valuable asset on earth outside of gold? Between 150, as of right now, 145, 150,000. Do you realize how close 150,000 is for Bitcoin right now? We're talking about Bitcoin. We're not talking about anything. We're not talking about gold. We're talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is trading at 63,000. Do you know that 150 is a freaking stone's throw away for Bitcoin? I believe that by the end of 2025, Bitcoin rises up the ranks to be number one within the next 18 months. Let me show you something here. Let me do this. If you'll allow me, if you will you allow me? Will you allow me? Okay. All right, let's do this. I want to show you. Will you allow me? Yes? Okay. Here we go. What you're looking at here is the most valuable assets on planet Earth. Now, I want to bring your attention to something. Take a look at here. We're looking at out of 8,395 upper left-hand corner. Okay, see that? 8,395 items. Bitcoin is number 9 in the world. And it's the baby. Bitcoin's the baby. Bitcoin's the goo gaga of the bunch. It has surpassed JP Morgan, who's been in existence for over 100 years. Do you understand this? It is more valuable than every bank in the entire world. It is more valuable than every financial organization in the entire world. It is more valuable than Warren Buffett and all of his shenanigans. It is more valuable than companies that have existed for decades upon decades, if not hundreds of years. And it's all done this in 15 years or less. It is also the 13th most valuable currency in the world out of approximately today. There used to be 200, a bunch of them went to zero. So we're now at about maybe 165 currencies in the entire world. And Bitcoin's number 13 in less than 15 years. And how old is the British pound? How old is the US dollar? Do you follow what I'm saying? It's the goo gaga. It's the baby of the bunch. And it is rising up the ranks faster than anything that has ever been witnessed by human beings on planet Earth. And I'm here to tell you people that by the end of 2025, do you see this? Let me show it to you again. Bitcoin is number 9. Okay. It will climb to 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and it'll take over, in my opinion, number 2 under gold this cycle. That means before the end of 2025. Now, remember, Apple and Microsoft are 2 of the most owned assets on planet Earth. Why? Because they're 2 of the most valuable assets outside of gold. You have no choice but to have an allocation to Apple and Microsoft. There is no choice, guys. You don't have to like them. It's not your decision. You will get fired. You will get annihilated. It's game theory. No fund is going to allow other funds to have Bitcoin as the second most valuable thing on planet Earth. All right, outside of gold. The most valuable thing on planet Earth outside of gold. No one's going to allow you to hold it and I don't hold it and you get the edge on me. That's game theory at its finest. It works in this industry. You're going to have an allocation to Bitcoin whether you like it or not. Now, this is not going to just start when Bitcoin becomes number 2 on this list. It's going to start when it starts to become number 5, number 4. And when it becomes clear that it is on its way there. So if Bitcoin takes over Microsoft at $150,000 a Bitcoin, then where is the avalanche or the mad rush into it going to start before that? I say once we cross 100,000, you're going to see starting to see a mad rush in because 50,000 is a stone throws away from that. It's not going to be, well, let's wait for it to get there first, then make our first move. That's not going to happen. So you've got the vast majority, people, you got the vast majority of Wall Street is still short the upside in this asset. Do you understand? They're short the upside. There's still trillions of dollars that are on the sidelines that will have to be allocated in some portion to this asset. You can't not own one of the most, or have no allocation to one of the most valuable things on planet Earth. As I mentioned, by the end of 2025, I think Bitcoin holds position number 2. By the end of 2028, gold is not number 1 anymore, people. That is my view, and I'm sticking to it. Gold drops, Bitcoin takes its position in the next cycle, the 2028 cycle, and it will never, ever, ever, listen to me carefully. When it takes out gold and becomes number 1, right now that would be about 750,000, more or less. Once it takes that out, you will never, ever, for the rest of your life, you will never see Bitcoin relinquish number 1, ever. Not only will it maintain itself as the most valuable asset on planet Earth, it is going to separate itself from number 2 exponentially so until you die and beyond. It'll not only be number 1, it will be number 1 by so far that number 2 will actually feel like it's number 1 because it can't see number 1. That's how far in number 1, the number 1 spot Bitcoin's going to be. It's going to double, triple, quadruple lap number 2. When number 2 sees Bitcoin's back, it's like, Bitcoin's there, I'm close. No, buddy, you just got lapped 5 times. This is the 5th time I'm passing you. You will never see Bitcoin relinquish the number 1 spot in the entire world. Why am I so certain of this? Number 1, Bitcoin is mathematically designed to increase in value every single 4 years of its existence until you die and beyond. It is mathematically designed and no one can stop it. It is already, as of today, it is the scarcest asset on Earth. As of today, it is the hardest money human beings have ever encountered. As of today, what does hardest money mean? Hardest to produce more of. Mathematically designed to go up every 4 years. It's the scarcest asset on planet Earth today. Now, right now, it's the hardest money the world has ever seen. And it's the only global neutral money in the world. People, do you understand what this means? The world right now is saying we no longer want a money that the US controls. We no longer want the money that anybody else controls. What money is that? What's the most neutral money on Earth that no human being can control, no country can direct or control or influence or turn off or turn on or pause? What money is truly operational in every single country in the world? What money is unstoppable? What money clearly lays out its monetary policy, has zero surprises, and has never broken a single promise ever since the day it came into existence? What? If I was a country no longer wanting to rely on another man controlling my future, my money, what I busted my ass for, now you control that. That's what every other country in the world has had to deal with the US dollar having world reserve currency status. that another man, another country, another group of men, these group of Americans control my country's future. They control the price of my money. They control my sovereignty. I no longer have self-sovereignty. If I don't do what they say, my money, my sovereignty gets turned off. My money gets repriced downward, if not turned off completely, like Russia's money, like Venezuela's money, like Iran's money. Let's turn this shit off. So with the political tensions, the geopolitical tensions, this move to get away from money controlled by other people, that's your other cornerstone, that the world is in search for a neutral money that no man controls and that has no surprises. And because it has no surprises, I can plan around it. I can project in the future. Without short term, I can now have long term projections. I can think with a lower time preference because there's no surprises. I don't have to wait to see what Jerome Powell says next month when he stands up in front of that stupid mic on his podium. I don't have to walk on pins and needles anymore. The monetary policy of Bitcoin is mapped out all the way to 2140. And no one can change it. No one can stop it. It's global. It's usable in every single country, every single city on planet Earth. It can't be shut down. It can't be hacked. It's never been hacked. It's the only thing on planet Earth that has never been hacked. And it's the only thing on planet Earth that has never broken its promise, ever, ever, ever. Everything in our lives has broken a promise. Everything in our lives has gone back on its word. Everything in the human experience until now. And for all of these reasons, the world over the rest of this decade will descend on Bitcoin, whether they like it or not. We're not going to have to convince anybody. You have to have an allocation to one of, if not the most valuable thing on earth. You have to. The world is seeking a neutral money. There is no better money. It's the hardest money ever. It's the scarcest asset on earth. And, oh my God, America's taking the lead in this. What are we waiting for? Guys, I'm telling you, Bitcoin, before all of this, became the best performing asset the world has ever known. Now think of with this going forward. If you think the last 15 years was miraculous, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because now is when the world starts descending on your Bitcoin. Holy shit. Are you serious? Every time I talk, Bitcoin surges, does it not? I'm right? It's true. I'm telling you it's true. Look at this. It's crazy. Any thoughts on Bukele, Max Kaiser, and what they did for El Salvador? I do have thoughts on that. I think that El Salvador and what's Bukele, with the help of Max Kaiser and a variety of others, I think what Bukele in particular did has already guaranteed that El Salvador stays in the annals of Bitcoin's history. And I do not think it's by chance that the first country, the first nation state on this planet, I don't know about any other planets. I have yet to do intergalactic travel. But I do know on this planet that we live on, that El Salvador was the first country, the first nation state to adopt Bitcoin. And I do not believe that it is by chance that El Salvador is the Spanish word for the savior. And so the country literally named the Savior, was the first country to adopt the Savior. It's crazy, right? You can't freaking write this better. It's wild. I believe that El Salvador has created and laying down a clear roadmap, a blueprint, if you will, for almost every other Latin American country in its region and beyond. I believe that because of what Bukele and El Salvador did and the success, and you're about to see the success explode. Do you understand me? The success they've had is impressive, but it ain't nothing compared to what's going to happen. And I believe that it is going to make it clear, just same way Michael Saylor has for Bitcoin being part of your treasury program, laid a blueprint for virtually every other Latin American country and other countries in similar circumstances. You understand? So you've got El Salvador serving as the blueprint to follow if you're in this kind of El Salvador zone or like position. But on the opposite end of El Salvador, you have the United States, who is showing you a blueprint as a country of how you build for Bitcoin. You deem it a commodity without an issuer. You get your accounting rules set to make it beneficial for your citizens and your companies, which are also citizens, to hold. You embrace Bitcoin mining. You kill the FUD that it's bad for the environment, right? You get your TradFi system behind it in the form of spot Bitcoin ETFs. And the following step, which is going to come, it's being resisted now, but that's all narrative smokescreen stuff. You allow all of your banks and regulated custodians to hold it. And it is the US laying that blueprint. So El Salvador is laying a different blueprint for a different type of nation state that fits more, that's closer to what El Salvador is. And then you've got the US laying another blueprint for the type of country that America is. And so both of these countries are leading the charge. El Salvador and the United States. They're both leading the charge. Whether you like that or not, that's what's happening. It's insane. It's freaking insane. Guys, I always have journals and notebooks or what have you always around. They surround me. They're so very integral to my life. Ever since I was a kid, actually. Boom. They're all over the place here, guys. Pens, you see the pens here? And I still tend to be somewhat of I guess I'm old school in that regard. I do try to stay up to par technically as much as I possibly can, but I haven't really been able to make a 100% switch away from analog note taking. There is something, I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but there is something about holding a pen, a nice journal, a leather-bound notebook, a high-quality pen. There's something magical in the process of taking something that lives in the ethereal part of your being, your mind, for lack of a better word, your consciousness, and taking that thing from that ethereal state of existence into the first form of physical manifestation. And that is through writing it down. I've always appreciated the process of pulling something from the ether, like a thought, an idea, an epiphany, something that strikes you as important or interesting, regarding that as unique to you and no one else in the world, and then not leaving it there, but taking that and actually popping it into the physical world, right? Into the physical world, giving it its first taste of physical manifestation in the form of it being put on a piece of paper. And what's really fascinating about this process, right, is that it can now have a life apart from you, in a sense, in that it now looks back at you. So the note you just took actually now has a physical existence. And you can visit that note multiple times, countless times. And when you revisit that note that you took, it actually looks back at you. So there's now two things. And I've always appreciated the magic that I felt in that process. I retained far more writing things down for myself, even though I knew that they were potential, that perhaps it was easy to remember and that I would never forget. I would never really leave it in the ethereal world. And that's just worked for me. So anyway, when I'm always reminding you, grab something to write with, I think of that. I think of how important it's been in my life. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's all I had to talk to you about, guys. I want to always let you know, remind you that I appreciate each and every one of you. There's 1,172 people here joining me live here today. That is very special to me. I am flabbergasted by your generosity, your ability to sit here and listen to me frickin' blab about Bitcoin. It's amazing to me. And I pinch myself sometimes. It is not something I take for granted. I made a promise a long time ago. Whether I'm speaking to one person or 1,178 people, I would do my very best to leave behind something, just something of value, something that potentially makes you think or ponder, or maybe something that potentially leads to a lifelong change. I hope I've done that here today. And if I haven't, I promise I'll get better every single time. All right, guys. All right, ciao for now. You know what to do. Go to work. Enjoy the Bitcoin pump, enjoy the pump, go to work, stack harder. You know what to do. Boom. My name is Oliver Velez, and I am your 13%er Bitcoiner. Be safe out there, and until next time. Boom.